Move on to the next session, which is on the surgical aspects of breast cancer and what we have new in this area. So we're going to have three wonderful speakers. For this session, I would like to invite our chairpersons who will then introduce the speakers. So would like to welcome Dr. Kapil Kumar, who is a senior consultant surgical oncologist at Fortis Hospital, Shalimar Bagh and FMRI Gurugram, and Dr. Rajiv Agarwal, who is a senior consultant surgical oncology breast services at Medanta Hospital, Gurgaon, and Dr. Suhani, who is an associate professor of surgery at All India Institute of Medical Sciences. So I welcome all the three chairpersons. Over to you, sir.
Kapil, go ahead.
Good evening, and thank you for inviting us for chairing this session. And as I can see that the session is about making less and less surgery for the breast cancer. And to start with, Dr. Vedant Kabra, he will be talking about can we do away with sentinel node biopsy also in breast cancer management. Dr. Vedant Kabra is a accomplished surgeon, and he is HOD of the cancer surgery at Manipal Hospital, Dwarka. Over to Vedant.
Thank you, Dr. Kapil, and thanks to Dr. Arun as well as Dr. Vaishali for giving me this opportunity. Let me share my screen and then, so before I start, I was wondering when I was given this talk for 20 minutes, what will I speak for 20 minutes for avoiding SLNB in breast cancer management? But I think I'll be able to take those 15-20 minutes. So if we see the journey of breast cancer and role of axillary surgery, the theory of breast cancer changed from initially being humoral, then to anatomical, and then again coming back to something like humoral, which is now biological based. And similarly, the treatment of breast cancer also changed. Initially was empirically, you remove everything from breast in continuity to axilla and muscles, changed to anatomy or pathology based, and then now slowly moving towards biology based. And what has been the role of axillary surgery? Is it to improve survival, to stage the disease, to control the disease loco-regionally, or all of them combined? Let us see how it has changed over time. There are various contributing factors for de-escalation of surgery, especially in axilla and also in breast. So there is more and more awareness, increasing screening mammography, which is leading to early diagnosis. And hence we have negative axilla. There is increasing value of systemic therapy as well as radiation therapy. So we have an opportunity to de-escalate treatment. And more relevance is now placed on biological markers instead of axillary nodal status for prognosis as well as personalization of treatment. And also, we see that neoadjuvant systemic therapy has come up in a big way and is used for almost anything which is node positive, HER2 positive, and triple negative. So we are seeing that doing less is becoming more these days. So the journey for de-escalating axilla actually began way back in 1970s and 80s with NSABP B4 trial and King's and Cambridge study. Both of them had an arm which did not do anything to axilla at the time of trial, but they showed that the survival was similar. Of course, the arm which did not receive radiation had a much higher loco-regional recurrence, but it did not translate into a bad survival. So even without doing anything to axilla, they had similar survival, which we saw as the first role of axillary surgery. And then ALND remained the gold standard until mid-1980s. The turning point came in 1990s with the era of sentinel lymph node biopsy. There was a historical switch from complete axillary dissection to sentinel lymph node biopsy in early breast cancer. And multiple trials have proven its safety. There are at least 7 trials, the largest one being NSABP 32 with over 5,500 patients, the Milan trial and many more trials, in which SLNB was followed by ALND versus only SLNB in node negative early breast cancers. They did not find any difference in survival or recurrence rates. and axillary recurrence rates were less than 1%. So with an FNR of almost 5 to 7%, you still find an axillary recurrence rate of less than 1%. So it was shown that staging is possible with sentinel lymph node biopsy, and you don't need a complete axillary dissection. What we got as a bonus was lymphedema rates, which were less than 5%, and of course, improvement in shoulder function as well. Now came the new millennium, and we started to avoid even axillary node dissection in sentinel node positive patients. So micrometastatic disease, we have 2 large trials with good follow-up, one of them also including mastectomy, and we don't need to proceed to ALND if there is micrometastatic disease on sentinel lymph node biopsy. We also know there are multiple trials looking at macrometastatic disease. The first one and the most famous one, Z11, then AMAROS, and there are other trials as well. So they showed that it is safe to avoid axillary node dissection if radiation and systemic therapy is given. In AMAROS, there was a comparison between axillary radiation and observation. But we have to be very careful that these are select group of early disease patients, and they may not be very applicable to a large proportion of our Indian patients. And there are again ongoing trials looking at the same thing and including more and more mastectomy patients, so we can use it for wider group. So here we see that the third role of axillary treatment, axillary surgery, which is local control, is also going away. So there is equivalent local control even without doing axillary dissection in a limited node positive disease on sentinel lymph node biopsy. And post-chemo SLNB, I'm not going to talk about because the next talk is completely on this by Dr. Neeta Nair. And then after post-chemo SLNB, we did not sit quiet, we wanted more. So 2010s and then the coming decade, this decade, we are now looking at axillary observation, which is the topic of my talk. We know that the information which we get by pathological end status is mainly prognostic. It is not deciding the treatment largely nowadays because it is more and more guided by biological parameters. So a clinical as well as a radiological by ultrasound N0 axilla in early breast cancer, the trials have started between sentinel lymph node biopsies versus observation. And there are multiple trials and studies going on. They are evaluating whether the lack of pathological end status would be adequate enough to decide adjuvant treatment and just do away with sentinel lymph node biopsy as well. However, before I jump onto those trials, let me give a few scenarios where we can safely omit axillary surgery, any kind of axillary surgery. One is DCIS, which is being treated with breast conservation surgery. However, there are certain exceptions. If a large area of DCIS or abnormal area seen on imaging, which is more than 5 centimeters, and some people say in palpable DCIS as well as in high-grade DCIS, it is better to do sentinel lymph node biopsy. If DCIS is being treated with mastectomy, it is preferable to do sentinel lymph node biopsy because if the final histology shows invasive cancer, then it would become difficult, not impossible, but difficult to do a good sentinel lymph node biopsy. In cases where we are doing contralateral or prophylactic or bilateral prophylactic mastectomy, there again, there is no role for even doing sentinel lymph node biopsy. And old patients who are hormone receptor positive, HER2 receptor negative, T1, T2 disease, clinico-radiologically N0, we can safely omit axillary surgery, any kind of axillary surgery. NCCN also states in 2020 that in the absence of data demonstrating superior survival, axillary staging may be considered optional in patients with particularly favorable tumors, patients for whom the selection of adjuvant therapy and or radiation is unlikely to be affected, the elderly, and those with serious comorbid conditions. Now coming to the trials which are ongoing, before I go to the trials, I would like to draw your attention to the last line. There have been multiple retrospective studies which have seen the sensitivity of axillary ultrasound in detecting low nodal burden. And here by low nodal burden, I mean less than 3 nodes. And they have a very good predictability for detecting low nodal burden, upwards of 95%. So the stage is already set that if a good radiology is there, then we may be able to avoid sentinel lymph node biopsy. However, these are all retrospective studies, and we need to have more prospective as well as randomized data. And multiple trials are there. Sound is probably going to finish the first, has a target population of 1560 patients, target recruitment, T less than 2 centimeter size, and only breast conservation. All other trials have taken tumors up to 5 centimeters. Good number of them are going to finish in 2027. Probably we'll get final results even later for those trials. But huge number of patients, and INSEMA trial, I'll come to details later, has 6,000 patients. Now, this is the SOUND trial, and this is the schema. Patients with breast cancer less than 2 centimeters, any age is allowed. They have to have breast conservation surgery and negative preoperative axillary assessment. And by that, we mean negative ultrasound of axilla. And if there is something suspicious on ultrasound, a negative FNA, or only a single doubtful axillary node on ultrasound. And they are randomized to sentinel node biopsy, the technique as per the policy of the institution, versus no axillary surgery. Now, we have some early results, but they are results only about the physical function. This was published in 2016 in EJSO. This is about physical function by giving a questionnaire, which is validated questionnaire of disability of arm, shoulder, and hand, and quick dash questionnaire, only on 180 patients. 176, the information was available, 94 in the sentinel node arm, and 82 in the observation arm. As you can see on the left side of the screen, immediate post-surgery, the quality of life, the physical disability, and the symptoms were much worse, which is a solid line represented by sentinel node arm. On the right side, those sentinel node biopsies which were positive and high nodal burden underwent axillary nodal dissection, and in those patients it was even higher, and it continued to be high even after 6 to 12 months. However, in the observation arm and the sentinel node biopsy arm, these symptoms, they subsided and they became equal by 6 months, but there was definitely an early physical disability. This is the INSEMA trial, schema of INSEMA trial. Again, up to 5 centimeter tumors, imaging wise N0, more than 18 years or 18 years and above, planned for BCT and post-operative radiotherapy. This is randomized in 1:4 fashion. So this study was published when 1,000 patients were already recruited. If there is no SLNB done, they will be observed. In SLNB arm, you can see largely it is either SLNB negative or it is microscopic, micrometastatic disease. So nearly 86% of the patients would just be observed. Again, sentinel node positive up to 2 macrometastatic disease. They were randomized in the fashion of Z11 or AMAROS, complete ALND or just observe. But this has now been changed. There has been an amendment, and up to 3 macrometastatic nodes are being taken and randomized into these 2 arms. So there is double randomization in this study. However, as far as avoiding sentinel node is concerned, the first randomization is what we are looking at. So do we need sentinel node biopsy for adjuvant therapy decision? We are seeing that there are trials of observation versus SLNB, and they will test the hypothesis that we don't need SLNB for majority of early breast cancers, which are clinico-radiologically node negative. Now, DCIS with microinvasion. DCIS, we've already seen earlier, we don't need if we are doing BCS or if there are no high risk factors. But DCIS with microinvasion, hormone receptor positive, HER2 negative disease, the rate of pathologically N1 disease is reported to be 2.8% and really does not warrant sentinel lymph node biopsy because it can be taken care of by systemic therapy, which anyways most likely would be required. Now, hormone positive HER2 negative patients with low volume nodal disease, which is less than 3 abnormal nodes on imaging. And if there is available risk score, so that is responder study presented in SABCS last year, and it showed that these patients do not benefit by chemotherapy if the risk score is less than 25. So this is another group of patients which may not require sentinel lymph node biopsy at all. Now, SOA-PET study is a Chinese study. They are looking at a dedicated axillary PET CT scan in addition to ultrasound and then decide about sentinel node biopsy versus no sentinel node biopsy. Now, we are moving a step further this was upfront surgery and no sentinel lymph node biopsy. Now, can we omit sentinel lymph node biopsy post NSCT? Right now, we are still debating in India whether to do SLNB or not post NSCT, especially in N1 disease. N0, we all agree that we do, but for N1 disease, I think most of us are still not comfortable doing it. But here, people are talking about omitting SLNB post NSCT. And two studies, single-arm studies, one from Netherlands, other from Germany with multi-center involvement are starting. And hopefully they have started recruitment by now. January, they hadn't recruited yet. So ESSEX trial is from Netherlands, which is a single-arm study, T1 to 3, N0, HER2 positive, and TNBC. So they have selectively taken HER2 positive and TNBC patients because we know that these are the group of patients who would have a very good pathological response to chemotherapy. They should be CNO, that is clinically N0 by physical examination, ultrasound, and PET-CT, pre-operative or pre-chemo by ESSEX trial, and radiological complete response on MRI after NSC. This is the ESSEX trial, and their accrual goal is 340 patients. While in the UBreast trial, they have taken T1C to 3, similar biological profile, but here they do not mandate a PET-CT before chemotherapy. N0 by physical examination and ultrasound is enough, but what they require post-NSC is one step more, not only radiological CR on MRI, but a breast PCR on BCS. So they first do only a wide lumpectomy. If there is a breast PCR, and the patients are going to be planned for whole breast RT, they will not do SLNB in these patients. So to summarize and to discuss some future directions, SLNB remains a standard surgical staging procedure in upfront surgery, as well as for clinically N0 before NSCT and remaining clinically N0 post NSCT. Also clinically N plus N1, which gets converted to N0 post NSCT with certain prerequisites. And I'm sure Dr. Neeta will allude to that in more detail. Then there is increasing role of biology over anatomy or routine histopathology that we see in making decisions about systemic therapy. So this is again likely to lessen the need for SLNB in future. There are ongoing trials, which we have seen, SOUND trial, INSEEMA, and other trials, which are examining the omission of sentinel lymph node biopsy in T1, T2, N0 patients. And N0 here is clinico-radiologically with a targeted ultrasound of axilla. They are likely again to result in less and less axillary surgery in future. And it is more so in view of certain other studies, which I did not mention in the beginning. NSABP, I did mention there is an intergroup trial, and there are a couple of other studies which have used no axillary surgery arm, and they have randomized patients, and they have shown that it has no detriment, and the overall survival is same, the local recurrences are same. So more so in view of these studies, actually there is a talk that we can already predict what SOUND trial is going to show, because these studies have shown very safely that axillary surgery omission will not detrimentally affect the overall survival or local regional recurrence rates. So we can almost predict what SOUND trial is going to show. High nodal PCR rates in HER2 positive and triple negative patients who achieve radiological CR and pathological CR is again an opportunity to avoid post NSCT SLNB. But then these two trials that I mentioned would probably show us the right direction. Improvement in axillary imaging in cases of upfront surgery is what we need, so that our sensitivity, our specificity is good, and we can rely on ultrasound to avoid SLNB. And also the expanding role of biology in selecting systemic therapy will again obviate the need for axillary surgery as a decision maker for systemic therapy. And finally, in N+ disease, we will see more and more that response to systemic therapy is likely to become the primary determinant of extent of axillary treatment rather than going for axillary treatment directly. Thank you very much. And as I said in the beginning, less is more.
Thank you, Dr. Vedant. Is there any questions, please?
Thank you, Vedant. I have one question. Like you have a now OPD on Monday morning. First patient comes and she is suitable for not doing SLNB. Will you advise in the circumstances in India? the kind of patients we have, they are N0 and you will not do SLNB.
So, yeah, so I have very clearly mentioned that there are certain group of patients which we can still omit right now also. That is prophylactic mastectomy, which is DCIS undergoing BCT without any high risk factors.
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the patient who are invasive cancers, T1, T2, clinically N0. Will you advise?
No,
SLNB?
no,
Not
as of now. Not as of now.
This is what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yes, not as of now.
Yeah.
And that is what I mentioned in my talk as well.
So, if there are no more questions, thank you, Vedant.
Thank you.
Next speaker probably needs no introduction, Dr. Neeta Nair. She's a professor of surgical oncology in the breast services at the prestigious Tata Memorial Hospital, Mumbai, which is alumni for all three of us, me, Kapil, and Vedant. Vedant has already set the ball rolling of de-escalation of surgery in the axilla, and Dr. Neeta is going to address one step further, that is it safe to omit axillary lymph node dissection after NACT? Dr. Neeta.
Thank you so much, sir. At the outset, I'd like to thank the organizers for this opportunity. And I think in the aftermath of whatever's happening in Delhi, it's quite awesome that you're all online. So I hope everyone's staying safe. I'm going to take it forward from where Dr. Kabra left it off. Very eloquently done. And as always, Vedant. So I think what we've looked at, and just like what Dr. Kapil said, is that we need to always look at it with a slightly different scenario, as is what is seen for us in India. Can we really omit ALND after NACT is not a single yes or no answer. And I'm going to take you through that. The first concept, and I think Dr. Kabra alluded to that a lot, is that we've already moved towards conservation because of reasons of morbidity associated with ALND. However, if you look at it post-chemotherapy, you're not always sure that, or this has been the hypothesis, that we weren't always convinced that it was going to be the same sentinel node you'd identify, because potentially that original sentinel node may have got fibrosis post-NACT, so the pathway gets blocked, and you now end up picking up different nodes. Fortunately, there have been studies that have shown us that there is some safety in it, and that's what we'll go through today. So when we look at it, we have the following possible scenarios. Pre-neoadjuvant chemotherapy, you could possibly have a clinically or clinico-radiologically N0 axilla. Your patient could have N1 disease or N2 disease. And of course, post-NACT, that scenario would change. So to address the first aspect of clinico-radiologically N0 pre-NACT, the evidence comes from a large number of prospective studies. The first of which was the GANIA-1, which was a multi-institutional study. It told us that the FNR rates were very similar to that in a patient who would have been done upfront. So if it's pre-NACT CN0, post-NACT CN0, the FNR rates were similar to upfront surgery, as was the identification rate. However, in the node positive group, they did not appear to show the same benefit. The MD Anderson group looked at 3,000 patients with upfront surgery, 500 patients with post-NACT surgery, and suggested that identification rates in the post-NACT group were as high as 97, with a 6% FNR in a CN0 group. Even the meta-analysis gave us an FNR which was fairly acceptable for a CN0 group. We've even got a body of follow-up for that group, which came from the GANIA-2 trial, where we were able to understand that out of the 419 clinically node-negative patients who had SLN alone, only one patient had a recurrence at 3 years. Even Galimberti et al. Published their data at 5 years, suggesting that there was a 0.6% axillary relapse rate. And this is again in a CN0 population. So how we can take this forward is that the first argument that always came up was, when do you do this sentinel node biopsy? Should you do it prior to chemotherapy or post-chemotherapy? The NCCN guidelines and the St. Gallen consensus wasn't really conclusive on this, with a lot of experts differing in their opinion. Pre-neoadjuvant chemotherapy, the advantage or the fight or the argument has been in reference to accurate axillary staging. But I think if we've got good radiology and we supplement our evaluation with that, we may be able to do good, accurate staging with a good clinical radiological evaluation. And just as Dr. Kabra said, now the role of post-chemotherapy residual disease has become more pertinent, it's more prognostic than is the pre-chemotherapy situation. So if you look at it, you are going to see more node response or more PCR within the nodes in triple negatives and HER2s. And that group would then unfortunately have had evaluation both pre and post chemotherapy. And then there's a second surgery that the patient also has. And tumor biology, honestly, is taking over in terms of prognosis over and above everything else. So we have all shifted towards doing post-NACT sentinel node biopsy in the post-NACT setting or after neoadjuvant response in a clinical radiological node negative axilla to start with. And again, like I said, that has to be supplemented with good imaging. If you just look at something as simple as ultrasound, when you add an FNA, the sensitivity of it goes up to as high as 73%. Of course, we moved forward towards more MRIs, post-NACT and evaluation related to that. So that's the first scenario. When you look at the second scenario is that your patient could be node positive and post-NACT could respond to chemotherapy or not. So if you look at it, there are 4 studies that we know of, and these we've talked about fairly often, which are the 4 main studies evaluating exactly this. Clinically node positive, post-chemotherapy, if they became clinically node negative, could we conserve the axilla? Now, unfortunately, the overall FNR across these studies was not acceptable. But when we looked at more than 3 nodes or we used dual tracer, the FNR did improve. I would bring to your attention that something as simple as low axillary sampling done in the post-neoadjuvant setting in the similar scenario has an FNR of 9.9% across the whole group. Just for the sake of the PGs online, I'm going to run you through these 4 main studies to understand why we still question them. The Sentina, which was the first of the studies, had 4 arms. The arm that was of relevance to us, which was arm C, that is someone who was clinically node positive and then became clinically node negative post-chemotherapy. 592 patients, the false negative was as high as 14.2%. The overall false negative reduced as we evaluated more lymph nodes. So if you have at least 3 nodes identified in sentinel node and those are evaluated, your FNR falls to an acceptable of 7%. Unfortunately, that was only 34% of that patient population. So in the rest of the patients, that's not adequate number of nodes sampled. If you look at the ACOSOG trial, 756 women, false negative of 12.6%. Again, it improved when dual dye techniques were used or at least 3 nodes were removed. And this study, as was seen with some of the other studies also, had a very low representation of actually clinically N2 disease to start with. And this study, it was only less than 5% of the patient population. The SN-FNAC study used IHC for evaluation of the sentinel node, and it wasn't just routine H&E. Of course, the FNR was 8.2 with 1 node removed and it dropped to 4.9, much smaller study of 153 patients. The GANIA2, which we had also discussed earlier, 957 patients, the 419 was CN0. The rest of the group, which was N1 to start with, the FNR was about 11.9%. What they did tell us out of that study was that there were certain factors which we could use to predict the probability of a positive node post-NACT. Those factors were residual breast tissue more than 5 mm, residual tumor tissue more than 5 mm, lymphovascular emboli, and all of these point towards additional nodal positivity with a risk of about 3.7%. So which brings us to LAS. I will say that LAS has probably got a little bit of a role more so here than even in upfront, just because your average number of nodes or median number of nodes will be higher with this. 751 women, and this was, sorry, I should have changed this. It's been published in the Journal of Global Oncology earlier last year. And with a median tumor size of 5 centimeters, which is actually what we see in our neoadjuvant patients and not the smaller tumors, We've been able to identify the node in almost about 98% with an FNR of 9.9%. So we were therefore able to suggest this was a good alternative. We've talked about the various methods that we would need to reduce the false negative rate for sentinel node, one of which is, of course, dual dye technique. And I think Somshekhar will even talk to us about the ICG. But the more important among them was identifying at least 3 nodes, which is what we saw across all the studies. Unfortunately, in all of the studies, the representation of patients wherein more than three or more nodes were identified is actually less than half of that. And the median number of nodes was 2 across most studies. One of the other techniques that's been advocated is therefore targeted axillary dissection. That is, when you do an FNAC, you put in a clip or you tag that lymph node, and post chemotherapy, you target that lymph node. So of course, the FNR dropped. This is part of the SNFNAC study, and it dropped to 1.4%, including with the Alliance study, when you took out that clipped targeted node. And at SABCS last year, and I think Vaishali had presented this at one of the updates that we did last year, where we talked about the clipped node was a non-sentinel node in 30% of the patients. And that brings us back to the first slide that I showed you, that you may have fibrosis, and when you do a sentinel node, you may actually be picking up another node and not the node that was originally positive. This validates the need for doing targeted axillary dissection if you want to do any axillary conservation post NACT. There are, of course, logistic issues. The clipped node requires localization with either a wire, radioactive seed, or mag seed. Wires in the axilla are not as easy to place and can be uncomfortable for patients. Clips, if not centrally placed, can float freely in the axilla when the node responds to chemotherapy, making it more difficult to find. There are, of course, various normograms and calculators that talk about what is the potential benefit or additional need for sentinel node or any axillary dissection. And like the GANIA-2 study, the more common of the lot was lymph node or lymphovascular emboli. Of course, we do know that it's residual breast tumor size or residual tumor size more than 5 mm, lymphovascular emboli, having N2 disease to start with, and of course, the method of detection. The long-term data for N1 disease who become N0 after chemotherapy comes from actually just the MD Anderson data, where there is a local recurrence of 1.2%. This was about 400 women with sentinel node post NACT, but this is again smaller T2 disease and not the kind of disease that we see. The world is moving forward, of course, and similar to the ACOZOG and AMAROS in the upfront setting, there is data that is evaluating the role of radiotherapy for patients wherein 1 to 2 nodes come positive post NACT in a node negative axilla. And of course, there will, like Vedant showed us, there is work even towards eliminating the role of SNB. But where we stand today and how I would look at when I go back into the clinic on Monday is someone who's clinically node negative to start with, good clinical radiological evaluation, prove she's N0, give chemotherapy, and possibly consider axillary conservation. Someone who's N1 to start with, clip the node, add additional targeted methodology to be able to offer some sort of axillary conservation. Anyone who's N2 to start with needs to have ALND in the current setting. So we do need to look at additional options of targeted axillary dissection, low axillary sampling for conservation in this setting post NACT, and ALND continues to be the standard as it is the most robust with the most available data. So just to conclude, in an N0 to start with, could we consider omit ALND and just do SNB? Possibly. The data is most robust there. If you were N1 to start with, if you want to be able to do axillary conservation, it's with controlled settings of targeted dissection and or low axillary sampling. For every other situation today, ALND continues to be the standard of care. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Neeta, for a very efficient and clear vision what we should do in the axillary dissection, because as NACT is increasing day by day, if there are any questions. Otherwise, I hand over to Dr. Sohani.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nita. Good evening, everyone. For the next session on the role of indocyanine green in breast cancer surgery, we have Dr. Soma Shekhar, who obviously needs no introduction. He is a consultant oncologist and head at the Manipal Health Center at Bengaluru. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Yes, I hope my audio and video both are there, and it's pleasure to be here. Nita, excellent talk as always. Vedant and Nita's talk filled with a lot of science and excellent. I thoroughly enjoyed, and we all know that's the future and things are evolving. Excellent talk. Today, what I'm going to show with our practical experience is how we can use ICG in breast treatment for better quality of life and surgery. Remember, it's called as fluorescence guided breast surgery. Fluorescence imaging using ICG, indocyanine green, is a tool which helps surgeons to improve the outcome and enhance the visualization of the lymphatics and perfusion. What are the advantages? It is safe, low toxicity, no radioactivity, easily available, low cost, don't need nuclear medicine dye, don't have to give any medicine dye in the ward or 2 hours before or overnight. After induction and patient is on anesthesia, you can do. You can use and visualize it real time. It is not a static image like when you use a handheld gamma probe, but it is a dynamic image. It is seen in front of your primary and it traverses, and it is not a static image. Multiple applications are available and it is very cost effective. So one, you can visualize the blood perfusion. You can see how the flaps, mastectomy flaps, or perforator flaps or diaps, you do whatever, blood perfusion is seen. Or you can also use for lymphatics for lymphedema surgery. Like in my hospital, if we do ALND, 100% we do primary LV, lymphovenous anastomosis in all our case. Or you can also see for lymphedema screening, real-time non-ionizing radiation. It's very important to understand the physics behind it. Look at the various fluorescence of hemoglobin, pulse oximetry, dextrose, emission spectrum, water. There is a small window we have between around roughly 600 to 900, preferably 700, 900. None of them pick up. Remember, hemoglobin doesn't alter, the water doesn't happen, emission spectrum doesn't alter. So this is where we exploit the ICG. So an ideal one is between 700 to 900 nanometer, and that is where the near infrared fluorescence imaging is there. Second, if you are at 400, tissue penetration is few millimeters, so it doesn't help you to identify the SLNB even before you keep a cut. If you use a handheld gamma probe with technetium colloid or blue dye, unless you open the axilla, you can never identify. But if you are at more than 600 to 700, you can see the depth of penetration is more than 1 centimeter, sometimes as much as 2 centimeter, which means before you keep a cut on the axilla, you can see the nodes through that. So this is some of the science message. And this is a probe which we have developed in Bangalore, made in India, which is CE approved, which I've been using since last several years. I have 3 such probes in my hospital. One runs the Sentinel node program, one runs the oncoplasty procedure program, and another runs the lymphedema screening in the lymphedema clinic. So it is very safe, multiple application available. It is called a .NM and very, very economical and cheap. ICG is made in India. It is US FDA approved way back in 1959 to be given IV for liver function test. It is very safe, non-ionizing, binds to lipoprotein and generates fluorescence, and it is excreted through the bile, the hepatic clearance, short half-life, 3 minutes. That is what makes it can repeat it. You can repeat it, it's thrown off, and it can be repeated every 15 minutes or 10 minutes. So this is called as Orogreen, comes in 25 milligrams sterile powder. It comes with a filter. If you put the filter, then you have small particle size, dilute, and then 5 milligram per kg you can use. Safe dose is 2 milligram, and this is the spectro, which is the curve which comes there. So what are its application in breast surgery? Anatomical imaging and physiological imaging. Anatomical imaging is sentinel lymph node, lymphedema screening, and lymphedema surgery. What is the physiological imaging we have? Free flap to plan, diaps, bilateral, unilateral, intraoperative decision to decide about the anastomotic techniques, to check the perfusion, to demonstrate the patency of the anastomosis you have done, to demonstrate flow through the perforator, if you have done a perforator paste flap like apps or any of them, and to check vascularity of the defect edges, Flap perfusion, if you have done a mastectomy, just give an ICG and look which part of the flap needs to be revived, which is not, or any local rotation flaps, or you have done a LD flap or mini LD, whatever. And flap monitoring post-operatively, if you have done a microvascular flaps, you can do this particular technique. And the other, so you can see the first one is sentinel lymph node. Unlike what is required with gamma probe, it is intraoperative single injection in front of your eye in few milliseconds. Primary, SAPI, lymphatic, goes to the axilla, fluorescence, dynamic scan. So you don't miss a level 1 echelon lymph node and think that, oh, I picked up a sentinel node, but it could be second echelon node, which would be negative and you would have missed. So you just give this. This is how exactly in front of your eye it comes. Patient anesthetized, sleeping, primary, lymphatic channel. You can follow in front of your eye in few milliseconds that it stops there and the node comes there. So you can do, this is a dynamic scan. And when you use this particular probe, you just follow that open, you have a beautiful fluorescence. So you will not miss second echelon nodes as first echelon node, but you will pick it up primary, go there and pick it up. Real time it can be picked up, no need to search. And then this is a part of our double arm trial which we did, which we got published in the Breast Journal. It is also could be blue. We did a double arm study comparing the standard of care with blue dye and gamma probe with this. See, this is how real time, primary site of injection, retrograde, retroareolar, SAPI. Even before you keep an incision in the axilla, you know where it is and it is very easy. So what are its advantage? No nuclear medicine doctor is required, no preparation required, no expensive gamma probe required, don't have to prepare 1 to 2 hours before, no incision required to open and expose. You don't have to even look at lymphatic channels. It is seen through the normal skin and efficiency is very high, very safe, not radioactive, extremely easy and dynamic scan. So this is what we brought as an Association of Breast Surgeons of India, ABSI, Indian solution for Indian problem. We did a large trial in India. So lymphatic channel, visualize site of skin to this, very easy to prepare, very economical, and single technique can be used. And these are all the various advantage we have in them and the light source is used. This is a large study which we did and the recent meta-analysis quoted for 100 case. We compared the standard arm and then you can see that this alone, ICG alone was superior to handle gamma probe with blue dye. And then it predicted false negative rate, FNR was less than 1%. And you can see it was 100% accurate and 100% concordant with the standard arm. You can go and read this. It is published in the Clinical Breast Cancer and it was immediately adopted by the Oxford review, immediately quoted as one of our largest study, which is published recently with the ICG in SLNB. So it was also presented in SABC, presented in Indian Journal, International Journal. You can go back and read. The second advantage is if you believe in reverse axillary mapping, thinking that the node coming from the arm can be preserved to prevent lymphedema, then you can give it to the web space. When you go down, you can identify the node which is for reverse axillary mapping above the axillary vein on the left, which may not have to be removed if it is not a part of the axillary node dissection. And you can, if you preserve that, the concept of reverse axillary mapping is that, that particular node you can mark with suture and you can keep that reverse axillary map, which is very easy to do. And if you use a technetium, it is very tough because everywhere then it will show hotspot and it is blowing up. But with this, you can do reverse axillary mapping. If you have done an axillary lymph node dissection, node comes positive. In my institution, it is a protocol. We immediately identify the leaking lymphatic, see this, and we trim that. And we do a primary LVA, lymphovenous anastomosis on table. So because we do this, the drain will stop very fast in 2 to 3 days. Lymphedema chances is significantly low. We have this paper published. You can see how ICG is leaking through the lymphatics coming. And then you can see primary lymphovenous anastomosis is done. Since it is a lymphatic channel, it doesn't get blocked. It doesn't need ecospirin, aspirin, or any dextran or any heparin. All the patients are discharged daycare. So we do sentinel node frozen section. If ALND is done, if it is positive, we do a primary LVA. We use the same thing as a rule so that the lymphedema is low and then the axillary drain just stops very fast. So there's a primary LVA, you can use it. And once you do that, we actually, give the ICG again, and then you can look at it. Once you give it the ICG, then you look whether the anastomosis is really working well. You can see that there's a primary LVA which is completed. And then you can see the lymphedema, even with radiation prolonged in the other patient on the arm you have done, it is very, very low. when you do a diap, you can see this is an young lady with bilateral mastectomy with bilateral diap. And you can see this is used to track the perfusion. So you can know which is zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, and you can map the perforator. You can see that here, this is the umbilicus. We know the perforator are around that. See, by just giving ICG, you can see the main dominant perforator. See that it is marked very easily. So you don't have to worry about CT angio before, then keep searching where they are, perforator mapping for, or even if you do tram, in these days we don't do tram unless you have a financial constraint, then you can know which part is not perfused, you can revise them intraoperatively. And after you elevated the flap, completely based on the perforator, then you can still give ICG again, because remember, ICG half-life is 3 minutes. You can repeat again and look, is the flap based on the perforator equally perfusing? Now you can see this is an hyperperfused area. So I can just revise it rather than causing later, a fat necrosis mimicking a recurrence. After you complete an anastomosis, you can see it is between the perforator branch of internal memory and this. You can know whether flap is adequately perfused with this anastomosis. Entire flap needs to be uniformly perfused. So you will not have any fat necrosis, altered mammogram findings, or hardness, thickening, compromising cosmesis and pain. Also, if you do a perforator flap, now you know that most of the breast oncoplasty type 3, type 4 Krishna class, you use perforator flap. See, I've raised a perforator here. And once you raise this, you can revise and give ICG and see, is the perforator flap clear? Even for a beginner, if you have done a modified radical mastectomy, you can see how after you finish it, I just give an ICG, we have this open probe and I can know which part of the mastectomy flap. See this on the right side, very clearly, you know how much you want to revise. So don't end up with unwanted, unfortunate flap necrosis, delays adjuvant radiation or treatment. So in short, to summarize, if you use ICG, no matter what you do, you will have a thin scar healed edges without any necrosis, not healed with secondary intention, no fat necrosis, no hard areas, excellent cosmesis based, ICG based high quality surgery in breast oncoplasty, be it level 2, level 3, level 4 or microvascular flaps. And you can have an augmented color both in monochrome, or you can also do in color chrome, which you can do, which is very easy. It has got 3 modes and you can see the perfusion uniformly. Enhanced quantification, you can do visualization. You can also do lymph node transfer in a very well set up type 3 particular area. And these are the paper which says mastectomy flaps based on ICG has got the lowest chance of any necrosis and delay in the adjuvant treatment. You can manage lymphedema very well. By ICG, we have identified 4 techniques: linear, splash, stardust, and diffuse. Linear and splash, you can manage with LVA. Stardust and diffuse actually need lymph node transfer. You can see this is a case where there is a splash and this patient needs a lymph node transfer, which needs to be done. And we do use this for lymphedema screening. We run lymphedema clinic twice a week in our hospital, 10 to 20 patients regularly. And then once you give this ICG, you can see, is it a primary pattern, stardust pattern, or what pattern you have, 4 pattern. So the type of lymphedema surgery which we routinely do on our institution can be based on this particular area. And then you report this lymphedema, and we have written a chapter in the plastic surgery book. You can go back and read. Want of time, I need to end. You also use it for VLNT, that is from the groin. We transfer the lymph nodes based on the ICG. We harvest this and then we put it in the arm, and then the lymphedema is taken care for the patient who has very advanced lymphedema. So it can be tackled where LVA cannot handle this. So in conclusion, various uses of ICG in the breast: simple, easy, inexpensive, no radiation, real-time dynamic imaging, helps in diagnosis and treatment option, and an excellent clinical outcome of the patient. So, ICG really helps, and let us glow with this as a breast surgeon and oncoplasty surgeon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Somashekar. There is one question in the chat box. I think that needs to be answered.
Dr. Somashekar has already answered that question.
Okay.
With this, we have come to the end of session 2. And I would like to thank the chairpersons, Dr. Kapil, Dr. Rajiv sir, and Dr. Suhani for gracing this occasion. And the last 3 speakers had been really, really magical. In fact, the more I listen to them, the more it becomes very, the concepts are so clear. So, after having listened to these impressive talks,